Clemson quarterback Trevor Lawrence, standing at 6'6", 220 pounds. This is the top quarterback of this year's draft class and the top player in this year's draft class. He demonstrates all of the traits that you need to be a successful quarterback at the next level, and he really demonstrated that going back to his freshman year. He's got a strong arm, he's got touch, he's got accuracy, he anticipates, he moves in the pocket very similar to how he's going to have to in the next level. And I think the thing that impresses me most is his overall athleticism. He can run. He outran Baron Browning, who's a legit 4.5, 40 speed player at the linebacker position for Ohio State. So you know he's got the goods. He's a complete package, probably the best prospect we've seen since Andrew Luck coming out of Stanford. The only questions you might have, well, sometimes he gets locked in too much on his first read, but he's had great wide receivers at Clemson, so it's understandable. And the other thing is he had a tendency to force some throws into some tight windows, but if I had an arm like him, I would too. My comp for Trevor Lawrence is Justin Herbert, and especially after being the Offensive Rookie of the Year, I think Trevor Lawrence is well on his way. BYU quarterback Zach Wilson, standing at 6'3", 200 pounds. You love to put on the tape of what he displayed this past season. He shows accuracy at all three levels, deep, intermediate, and shallow, and he makes some special throws into some tight windows, anticipating, throwing, articulating his arm and throwing into windows that he's going to be asked to do so at the next level. And so those improvisational skills are something that's rare to find in this year's draft class, but Zach Wilson has the capability of doing it. Now, even though he impressed this year on film, you do have to ask yourself the question, it was against a group of 5 schedule where they were playing against lesser opponents, and he had all day to throw the football. So that's going to be one of the biggest question marks he has going to the next level. Who he reminds me of, my comp for him is Derek Carr, quarterback for the Las Vegas Raiders. I think you see some of the similar skill sets from the two. There's no doubt Zach Wilson could be a franchise quarterback. North Dakota State quarterback Trey Lance, standing at 6'3", 221 pounds. This is a young man who's got a ton of potential and a ton of upside. He's a true dual threat quarterback. He can take off and run the football in a physical manner. He's got a little wiggle to him to make some guys miss, but he's also got an extremely powerful arm throwing the football down the field. And he's a good decision maker. Look at his touchdown to interception ratio in his only year starting at North Dakota State. But that's also one of his weaknesses, is he's only started one season. He lacks the experience that you're looking for. He obviously played at a lower level. And watching the tape, looking at the film, you don't see him make a lot of the anticipatory throws that you're going to have to make at the next level. And you see inconsistent accuracy throughout the course of watching him play in games. And on top of that, they didn't throw the football all that much. So a lot of question marks with Trey Lance. However, there's a lot of upside here. He reminds me a lot of Dak Prescott when I watch him play. And so, I think whatever team drafts him, he will need some development, but it could pay off big time in the future.
Florida tight end Kyle Pitts is 6'6" and 250 pounds. My nickname for him is the mismatch nightmare. He is going to be a real problem for defenses on the next level. He's too big for secondary people. He's too fast for linebackers. If there is one major concern with him, it's his blocking ability. But you're not drafting him to be an inline blocker. He will try. He will make the effort. He's just not very good at it. But you draft him because he's a red zone threat, and he's a guy who can get down the middle of the field in your passing game. Who's he remind me of? Darren Waller from the Las Vegas Raiders.
LSU wide receiver Jamar Chase, standing at 6'1", 200 pounds. One of the things I love about Jamar Chase is his ability to use his body and stack the cornerbacks, releasing downfield. The other thing is his hands. He's got tremendous hands. Very rarely do you ever see him drop a football, and he high points the football well and really plays bigger than he is, which leads me to some of the questions I have about how he's going to be evaluated. He opted out of the 2020 season. You don't know how that's going to affect his draft status. And on top of that, how fast is he? On film, it doesn't look like he's slow. He seems to be able to separate and get by most of the fast cornerbacks. But with a year off and not necessarily knowing his 40 time, not having a combine this season, that will be a question. But who reminds me of the most? Michael Crabtree. A guy that you can move around, put anywhere you want, and he's got the hands, the route running ability, and the ability to use his body to make the contested catch.
Alabama wide receiver Jalen Waddle is 5'10", 185 pounds. He's not very big, but boy, can he fly. He's one of those receivers that scares the daylights out of a secondary and out of defensive coordinators. He's the type of player, when you look at him on tape, he runs by people, defensive backs. He's explosive. He's got great start and stop ability, great change of pace in terms of his direction. He did suffer an injury last year at Alabama, a broken ankle, and it was a bad one, but he did come back and play in the championship game, and he did some good things, caught a couple passes, just didn't look the same. But the time off will be good for him. He goes in the top 10. Who's he compared to in the NFL? Dare I say it? Tyreek Hill of the Kansas City Chiefs.
Oregon offensive tackle Penei Sewell, standing at 6'5", 325 pounds. This is one of the top overall prospects in this year's upcoming draft. For starters, Penei Sewell has only played 2 years of college football, and he's put himself in a position to be a top 5 draft pick. He is a fluid athlete for his size, and he has some powerful hands. When he punches and he gets his hands on you, it's over. But he moves as well as a defensive back or any other skill position player, so it's pretty impressive. There's not really many holes in Penei Sewell's game. The really only question is how opting out of the 2020 season will impact potentially his draft status, and has he been tested? There's a lack of pass rushers in the Pac-12, so that's going to be one question that people have. But for his size and his fluidity and movement and overall technique at such a young age, he reminds me of Orlando Pace. I think he's got that sort of upside in what he can be at the next level.
J.C. Horn from South Carolina, corner, 6'1", 205 pounds. The thing that I love about J.C. Horn is his length, the God-given measurables that he's been blessed with. He's able to display that length, especially at the line of scrimmage when playing press man, bump and run, just being able to be disruptive against pass catchers, wide receivers. He's good in press coverage, like I said. He stays square. And if you really want to see exactly what type of player he is, turn the Auburn tape in 2020, playing against Seth Williams. He balled out. The concerns that I have with J.C. Horn, sometimes in 4 quarters of play, when he gets tired, he gets fatigued, he gets a bit too high. And sometimes that gets him away from his technique. But all in all, a top-tier like corner. I love J.C. Horn as a football player. The ultimate NFL comp. Let me go back in time a little bit. Al Harris. Pat Surtain Jr. The thing that I love about Pat Surtain outside of his measurables, he has a ton of experience. Jumped into the starting lineup as a true freshman there at Alabama. He's seen a lot of football at its highest level playing in the SEC. The concerns that I have with Pat Surtain Jr. is the top end speed. How fast is Pat Surtain? I can tell you this much. If he runs anything in the sub 4.4s, he potentially could be the first cornerback to come off the board. The NFL comp for Pat Surtain Jr. is Byron Jones. They have the same ideal size, the measurables, and they move around the football field the same way as well.
Alabama wide receiver Devonta Smith won the Heisman Trophy, and he did so for a reason. He's a big play threat on the outside. Every time he touches the football, there's a chance he could take it to the house with that speed. The big concern with him is that he weighs only 180 pounds. And if you look through history, there haven't been a lot of successful 180-pound wide receivers. Can he handle the jam at the line of scrimmage in the NFL? It's different. In college, guys don't have the play strength that the corners do in the NFL. If you can't get off that jam, it's going to be a problem. I think he will adjust. I think he'll be a good NFL receiver. Even at 185 pounds, he will be able to make plays. Who's his comparison to? That's a good one. That's a tough one because he's so thin, but Deshaun Jackson, the former game breaker, game changer for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Ohio State quarterback Justin Fields, standing at 6'3", 228 pounds. He is a true dual threat quarterback. He's got the ability to hurt you from the pocket. He's got a rocket for an arm. He's also accurate, but can make those touch throws, but also take off and run the football and be extremely effective. And he's a good decision maker. Look at his touchdown interception ratio throughout the course of his time playing for the Buckeyes. Now, a couple of things he's got to work on as he heads to the next level. His post-snap recognition of blitz and coverage. You could see at times, especially versus the teams that pressured him more like Indiana this past season, he would struggle at times to identify what the defense was trying to accomplish or take away from him. And the other thing is working through his progressions. After he got his first read, he had a harder time getting to number 2, 3, 4, 5 in the progression at times. But my comp for Justin Fields is Cam Newton. I think when you looked at Cam Newton coming out of Auburn, similar in size, similar in skill set, maybe not quite as big, but definitely a lot of upside there. A guy who won a former MVP.
Penn State linebacker Micah Parsons is a 6'3", 245-pound heat-seeking missile when it comes to playing the position. He is a run-and-chase linebacker who brings a lot of pop when he comes in and meets somebody in the hole. The concerns for him are instincts. Does he have enough of the instincts to become a tackling machine? I think he does. I think he's one of those guys, when you look at his skill set, he can get to the football and make a lot of plays. He opted out in 2020, so some teams will have to go back and study him closely in 2019. But what I see is Devin White, a linebacker from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a guy who can really change the way a defense plays with his speed and his athletic ability. Northwestern offensive tackle Rashaan Slater opted out in 2020 because of COVID, but if you go back and watch his 2019 tape, one game stands out. Against Chase Young, who was the second overall pick last year. Rashaan Slater did a heck of a job against Chase Young, who was the best college football pass rusher in a long time. When you look at what he is as a player, he's physical, he's tough, he's athletic, he can get to the second level. Sometimes he has problems with speed rushers coming inside of him because he sets wide, but I don't think that'll be a problem in the NFL. The one concern scouts have with him is his arm length. It's not long enough. I think they're 33.5 inches long. They prefer tackles to have longer arms, which means he might kick inside the guard. But he is a violent, nasty player, and if he stays at tackle, he reminds me of a former NFL player who went to Pro Bowls by the name of Leon Searcy. USC tackle Elijah Vera Tucker was a guard up until last season, and they moved him outside to play left tackle, and he did a really good job. Scheme versatility is important when you draft an NFL lineman, and he was a good guard, and he's been a good tackle. That will excite some teams who like guys who can play both positions. And I think he's going to end up playing guard on the next level, but you could also play him at tackle. A team like Kansas City, who needs help on their offensive line, could use a player like him to step in, maybe at tackle if their tackles aren't ready, or he can play guard. He's a nasty player. He plays with a violent streak. I think he's going to be one of those guys you plug and play for the next decade. Who's he remind me of? Kelechi Osemele, who is with the Chiefs. And he's a guy who played guard and tackle and was a tackle coming into the league, was an all-star guard, all-pro guard for the Baltimore Ravens. So Kelechi Osemele is a lot like Elijah Vera Tucker, or the other way around.
Alabama quarterback Mac Jones, standing at 6'3", 214 pounds. Well, it's hard to do better than what Mac Jones was able to do this past season for Alabama, helping them win a national championship, one of the most prolific offenses we've ever seen, in large part to his decision-making. He's a smart quarterback, showcases a high football IQ, with defenses doing all they can to take away some of his best targets. He's extremely accurate, has a strong enough arm to make all of the throws, and he manages the pocket well and handles pressure well. Now, there are some limitations to his game. At this point, you'd have to say that he's probably tapped out. I don't know that he's going to improve his arm strength or get that much better, but you also wonder if the situation and circumstance that he enters into isn't paramount for him because of that. He was surrounded by a lot of talent at Alabama. If he's taken high in this draft, that's most likely not going to be the case for that team he'll be playing with. So he's going to have to be able to overcome that, and also not being quite as mobile. That's what the NFL requires nowadays. But my comp for him is another former Alabama quarterback, A.J. McCarron. So I think in the right system, right fit, Mac Jones can be incredibly successful.
Tulsa linebacker Zavin Collins is 6'4", 260 pounds, and he's one of my favorite players in this draft. I love players who run to the football at the size that he plays at. That tells you how good he is. He's a former quarterback. Think about that. He's 6'4", 255 pounds, 260 pounds, and he played quarterback in high school, and he plays with that athletic ability. He's played inside in college at Tulsa, but there are a lot of NFL personnel people who think he will slide outside and play as a 3-4 rusher. Whoever gets him will be thrilled because he can run, he can rush, He can tackle, he can chase, and he can cover. Who's he remind me of? Brian Urlacher, who's now in the Hall of Fame.
Alex Leatherwood was one of the best offensive linemen in the entire country and certainly is one of the top picks coming out of this year's class. The 6'6", 315-pounder, one with strength, one with power. That's where he was at his best. He's light on his feet and can get wide against the best edge rushers in college football. Even though he's athletic, one thing that he did struggle with was his balance when opposing defensive ends got a little creative with their spin moves. He's going to have to get that worked out at the next level, but let's be real. We're talking about comparing ice cream flavors. It doesn't matter whether you like mint chocolate chip or cookies and cream. They're all good, and Alex Leatherwood is one of the best in the country. If I were to compare him to an NFL player, it would be Russell Okung. He's got the same kind of skills as the star offensive lineman.
Jalen Phillips out of the University of Miami is turning a lot of heads this NFL draft season. Started his career at UCLA for 2 years, then transferred to Miami, where he really started to flourish and came into his own. Former five-star recruit, so obviously he's got the physical skill set and traits you would want to see in an edge rusher coming at you. At 6'5", 258 pounds, with a long, lean body type, he's got the speed that really makes him the perfect combination as an edge pass rusher. He's versatile enough to defend today's NFL schemes. The one issue I've seen with him, injuries, ankle, wrist, concussions, they do start to mount up, and he needs to play a little bit lower as somebody who's a longer, leaner player gets his pad level down. If he does, he could be the next Cam Jordan.
From a size, athleticism, and speed perspective, Kentucky's Jamal Davis checks all the boxes you want from a modern-day linebacker. And he had a lot of production as a zone defender in 2020 for the Wildcats. The weaknesses to his game are that he didn't get to play a lot of man, so he could struggle facing off against tight ends, running backs, or slot receivers in the NFL. And there's really only 1 year of major production on his draft resume. As far as an NFL comparison, linebacker Jordan Hicks.
Florida wide receiver Cadarius Toney was sort of hit and miss for his first couple seasons in Gainesville. He hit a lot in 2020. This dude is a flat-out baller. You get him the ball in space, he will make you pay. He's the Swiss Army knife of college football. His explosiveness is off the charts, and he lived up to that ability when he got open. He was dangerous in space, but he did not win battles one-on-one as often as maybe he should be. That's what he needs to clean up to be a superstar. He's a special teams ace. He's a versatile wide receiver. Gonna compare him. High hopes. Florida fans might not like it, but we're going down to the U. Devin Hester is what this guy can be at the next level.
Kwity Paye, Michigan defensive end, is 6'4" and 270 pounds. He's a raw but explosive player. You think that his production would be better when you watch the tape. There weren't a lot of sack numbers, but he's a much better pass rusher than those numbers would indicate. He's going to need some seasoning on the next level. He's going to learn how to use his hands. He's one of those guys that gets by with raw ability. You can't do that in the NFL. But he's going to be a high draft pick, probably mid-teens maybe in the first round. And he's going to make a team happy. Who's he compared to in the NFL? Former Kansas City Chiefs pass rusher Tom Bahali.
Caleb Farley, cornerback from Virginia Tech. The thing that I love about Caleb, he has the ideal size for an NFL cornerback. 6'2", around 205, 207 pounds. That's prototypical size. And with that size, he's still able to move around like a smaller guy. He has fluid hips, nice feet, and I love his ability to stay in the hip pocket of any pass catcher he's covering. The things that I have when it comes to concerns with Caleb Farley, he's not as refined as some of the other cornerbacks that are projected to be first-round selections. He's only played cornerback at Virginia Tech for only 2 years, so yet and still he lacks experience, but he has a high ceiling, a very, very high ceiling. The NFL comp for Caleb Farley is Antonio Cromartie.
Virginia Tech left tackle Christiandaras is 6'5" and 317 pounds. He is a player who excels in pass protection. When you watch him on tape, he's got a wide body and knows how to use it. It's hard to get around him. He's good in the run game, probably could use a little more nastiness to his game in terms of finishing his blocks, but boy, he excels in the run game and he excels as a pass protector. Quincy Roche, the defensive end from Miami, said he was the best tackle he faced all year long, and when you watch that tape, you know why. He dominated Roche when they played Miami. Who's his NFL comparison? Laramie Tunsil from the Houston Texans.
Najee Harris out of the University of Alabama was one of the most heralded players in the country as the running back of the most prolific offense we've seen in quite some time. And you can see why when you turn on the tape just how magnificent he is. He's a versatile back who really doesn't show many weaknesses. He's a versatile athlete that's seen a ton of reps in his 4 years at the University of Alabama. He's a mismatch coming out of the backfield against linebackers or safeties in the pass game, and he's got nice hands catching the ball coming out, and he's not afraid of contact. If you really want to nitpick, I do think the top end speed is lacking somewhat, some of that explosive power, but it isn't something that would concern me. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he has a similar career to another Alabama running back, Mark Ingram.
Clemson's Travis Etienne is the best running back in this draft class. I love airbacks. Those are guys that can rip off 60-yard runs out of the backfield, but they can also take a reception and turn it into a 65-yard gain. That's who Travis Etienne is. He's the perfect back for the way the NFL game is played. He can get out of the backfield, hit you with home run passes, but he can also take a handoff and turn it into a long touchdown run. He's not great in pass protection, even though he is willing. He's just not great at it. That's something that will have to improve on the next level. But this is a game changer every single time he has a chance to do that, every single time he touches the football. Who's the comparison? Alvin Kamara of the New Orleans Saints. He's that type of back, an air back with explosive speed.
Greg Newsom, the cornerback out of Northwestern, one of the mainstays of this Wildcat defense. Pat Fitzgerald, the head coach, loves Newsom and really put him in a position to be successful. He had a terrific season for Northwestern. He stands 6'1", 190 pounds. Coming into the evaluation process for the NFL, early in that process, I think most people were looking at him as a second or third round pick. I think he has an opportunity to go in the first round. He's that good. Kind of reminds me of a guy like Trayvon Diggs, the corner for the Dallas Cowboys, formerly for the Crimson Tide of Alabama in terms of the collegiate level. I think his skill set translates. He's played in a zone-heavy scheme, but he's clearly got the skills and the feet and the speed and the athleticism to match up in those one-on-one situations at the next level in the NFL.
In an extremely deep wide receiver class, Rashad Bateman is clearly at the top of the list coming out of Minnesota. He's had a little bit of an up-and-down season, and last year was hampered by the fact that the Big Ten stopped, then started their schedule, then he opted out at the end. But I do like the fact that he wanted to come back and play his last year there and try to improve his status in the draft. While he didn't do that, he didn't do anything to drop either. He's an exceptional route runner. You see the technique, you see the form. He's a tough competitor. I love the fact that he did want to come back and try to compete this last season. The one thing, and this is nitpicking somewhat, top end speed isn't quite there when speed is all the rage in the NFL, and you do see occasional drops. Mohamed Sanu, I think, would be a pretty good comp for him, but I could also see a former Minnesota Viking player that he's similar to too, Hall of Famer Chris Carter.
Turner is a long player with a body structure that will allow him to play on the edge or kick inside occasionally. Standing up and dropping into coverage will not be a big part of his role. He does a really nice job of timing the snap and getting off the ball. The Texas native is able to turn speed to power when his initial rush is stoned, but needs to continue diversifying his pass rush skill set. Turner looks a little stiff in the hips and ankles and is more of a plotter than a sprinter. Although he plays a little high, he projects as a potential long-term starter in the NFL. My comparison for Turner is Aldon Smith minus all of the off-field drama.
Eric Stokes, cornerback from the University of Georgia. 6'1", 185, redshirt junior, a former 3-star prospect, a former track star standout as well. He's the ultimate outside corner, just like his fellow mate in crime, Tyson Campbell. He really developed there at UGA. The things that I like about Eric Stokes, he's very, very comfortable playing in front of the wide receivers, playing bump and run technique, playing man-to-man. Only allowed 1 touchdown in 2020, and that touchdown came from Devonta Smith. And I think you're okay in allowing a touchdown to the best player in college football in 2020. Some of the concerns that I have with Mr. Eric Stokes, sometimes he grabs a bit too much in coverage. He fails to locate the football on deep routes, and he has average athleticism for most cornerbacks. The ultimate NFL comp for Eric Stokes is Greedy Williams.
Rousseau is a long defender that opted out of the 2020 season. In 2019, he recorded 15.5 sacks, but most of that production came from over center. In the NFL, he is predominantly going to be asked to win on the edge. The Florida native will have just turned 21 years old at the start of the 2021 NFL Draft and had been a skill player until his final year of high school. He has essentially 1 season worth of college film. The natural ability is evident. He ran a 4.7 40-yard dash at his pro day, but talent evaluators may not be comfortable taking him in the first round with so many unanswered questions. Rousseau is a high motor player that projects as a starter in the NFL with boom or bust potential. My comparison for him is Jason Pierre-Paul.
Jason Oway, the edge rusher out of Penn State, one of my favorite players in this year's class coming into the NFL, stands 6'5", 252 pounds. You can officially put him on anybody's athletic freak list. That's a safe choice. Kind of reminds you of Montez Sweat out of Mississippi State, ultimately ended up with the Washington Redskins. I think he'll be a first round, maybe a second round draft pick. He's got physical attributes that are very differentiated. He can get into and out of those moves at the line of scrimmage, putting pressure on a quarterback. And as I mentioned earlier, he is a run defender. He got much better at it. Because of his skills, because of his athleticism, I think he has a bright career. The biggest thing he needs to clean up is sometimes he's passive, especially when the ball is getting run away from him.
It feels like we just got a sense of what Joe Tryon can go and accomplish. The edge defender from Washington has great size and athleticism, 6'4", 251 pounds. He really has his power and understands how to use it when going up against blockers. But he opted out for the 2020 season to prepare for the NFL draft. The limited Pac-12 season, left a lot of players with not as much tape, but with him not participating at all, it really feels like our amount of tape that we have on him as a prospect, is just not a lot to break down. You're also concerned about the transition to the NFL after spending so much time away. But I think about what it could be based on the limited amount that we have seen of Joe Tryon. And you just see an edge defender that can play with a lot of strength, with a lot of physicality, and really be able to overwhelm the opponents with that athleticism. And so as long as all this time off has not led to a degradation in any of those fine physical skills, well, this is a really, really interesting player to add to your defense.